Hi, everybody. Sorry, I'm looking out the window. There's a lot of storming happening. Thank you for joining. We're just going to wait a second here and make sure that people hear about the fact that we're live. And then we're going to have some interviews with Yes Abroad alumni who have done international development work or international community work, or projects involving lots of different groups of people. So that'll be really exciting. My name is Sky Henry. I'm the Yes Abroad Program Manager. It's nice to be here today with you. This is my first time ever going live. I have no reason to go live in my personal life. And this is definitely the first time I've gone live on this Yes Abroad venue. But all right, let me go ahead and figure out how to add people. Doop. We're going to try and add two of you guys at the same time. And if that doesn't work, we're just going to go one after the other. So I'm going to start with Alexa. Let's see. I've invited them.
Hello.
Hi. Hey, both of you at the same time. This was a challenge for us last week. This is so great. Hey, guys.
We did it.
I was just looking at instructions. Of all the people to do this correctly, I would not say it would be me. I would not guess that I'm the one to do this correctly. Well, welcome. So I was like literally probably just saw me say. I was just saying why we're here. We were going to talk to alumni about who have done work in the international development sector or international projects to kind of follow on in our conversation last Saturday, which if you missed it, not you guys, but the people who are following. If you missed it, you can check it out. It's posted on the Yes Abroad Instagram feed. And that was kind of more geared to people starting projects who maybe have never done a project before, who especially, one of the things we talked about was how Yes Abroad alumni in particular, but also Flex alumni and Yes Inbound alumni who don't live in like larger cities, a lot of times are in a decentralized alumni network. And when there are a lot of alumni, it can feel more comfortable to start projects with them because you have support and other people have ideas and you're not alone. A lot of Yes Abroad alumni, it's probably about 500 of you. You're scattered all over the United States and the world. A lot of times they don't live in big cities with other alumni. They live in college towns. And so, but I know this is the case with a lot of the 25,000 Flex alumni, the 13,000 Yes Inbound alumni as well. So that was more about starting small, not being overwhelmed, not being intimidated. You can do something on a small scale and grow it. And this is a little bit more about what happens kind of at the next level when you're maybe doing a very complex project, working with people in other countries. You yourself are maybe living in another country, or maybe you're living in another country and you're working, or you're living in your own country and you're working with people from like diverse backgrounds, right? So this is like more of a multi-step kind of alumni project. And you guys have experience with that. So maybe I'll stop talking for a second and then ask you guys to introduce yourselves. Maybe Alexa go first. So introduce yourself and kind of give a little bit of a background as to, where you went, who you are. I'll make you do it the way that we do in your on program. What's your name? Where are you from? Where did you go for, sorry, my mom declined. Sorry, Mom. Where you went for your Yes Abroad experience and when, and what you're kind of up to now, and then maybe tell us a little bit about why Yes Abroad asked you to join us today.
Sure. Okay.
Alexa, go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Alexa. I am originally from California. I'm currently in upstate New York. I went on Yes Abroad in 2011 to 2012 to Malaysia, so almost about 10 years ago now. Right now, I'm currently working for a permit and zoning law consulting firm, essentially working off like signing off on completion of buildings. So the reason I'm here with Yes Abroad today is after I finished college, I ended up getting a job with the Peace Corps, where I lived in Sierra Leone for about 2 years, teaching math and science to secondary school. They're living in a village at the same time. So yeah.
Great. And Alexa, Brendan, are you having a hard time hearing Alexa, or is that just me that her voice was really quiet?
Yeah, I can hear both of you quite well.
Interesting. Okay, I'm just gonna have to listen super hard here. Okay, great. All right, Brendan, why don't you introduce yourself? Sorry, let me find my.
Hello, I'm Brendan. I grew up as a military kid, so sort of lived all over the United States, but I was born in Honolulu, Hawaii, where I live now. I joined Yes Abroad in 2015, 2016. I was in Macedonia at the time. It's now called North Macedonia. And currently, I work half-time for the organization which I run there, which I started, as well as half-time with the organization called IsraAid, doing volunteer coordination for humanitarian food response in California.
Awesome. I was just looking for my questions that I was going to ask you guys. So I had that up in my head to restart my computer. So I guess maybe we could take an opportunity, and I guess for people watching, definitely let us know, if you're an alum of any of the programs and you've been working on alumni projects in your community too. We definitely don't need this to be kind of just us telling you about ourselves or these guys talking about their experiences, but I also think like share. I would really like to hear about other alumni experiences with projects, and also some of the questions that we're going to get into in a minute about like what makes these types of projects like additionally challenging on top of being a project that you work on. What about working with people from different backgrounds who are working in another country is like extra challenging? Because I know that we have a lot of alumni from the inbound programs from Flex and Yes Inbound who wind up living in another country. A lot of our Yes Abroad alumni wind up doing Peace Corps or teaching overseas or doing some type of year-long fellowship or another language program overseas and get involved. And so I think this is, relevant as well. So if you're an alum and you've done any of those things, definitely let us know in the chat, or, also please ask questions, as you hear these guys talk about their experiences. And I guess the reason I'm here today, the reason, if you saw our last Instagram Live with Ivan, a Flex alum from Montenegro, I asked him to moderate that discussion, because when I think of somebody who started projects on a small scale and grew them, it's Ivan. I got to know him like 13 years ago when we both started kind of working on these programs, and he was an alumni coordinator doing a lot of smaller projects and grew them over the years. And the reason I guess I'm here today moderating is because, like Alexa, I was a Peace Corps volunteer as well many years ago in Romania, one of our now Flex countries, from 2003 to 2005. And I like to tell at our pre-departure orientation each year, I like to tell Yes Abroad participants that I was like the worst Yes Abroad participant ever. Like all the things that we tell you guys to do or not to do, I was like doing the opposite. Like this meeting's supposed to start right now, right? Like, why isn't anybody here? Or like, you told me when I asked you if you wanted to do this project, you said yes, and now you guys don't want to do it. Like, what gives? Like not reading the subtleties of intercultural communication. And so I feel like I potentially learned these lessons the hard way. And so as we like to do on Yes Abroad, we like to normalize our failures and our challenges and learning from our experiences. And so I feel like I actually learned a lot about what to do, what not to do. And I truly still make these mistakes all the time. I guess I also have the added benefit of having kind of started the Yes Abroad program in a lot of the countries we work in, and working with staff and watching participants learn these experiences every year. It's very interesting. Alexa, I guess getting into your experiences, I'm curious to know like what kind of what can you tell us maybe a little bit more in depth about the project that you worked on when you were in Peace Corps, and what you liked about it and maybe what was really hard about it?
Yeah, so I want to say, first of all, going into Peace Corps, you get a job assignment, basically saying you are going to be doing this. So when coming in, you have this expectation that I was only going to be, a math teacher. But what happened is that when you end up going to these villages, they have different needs and wants versus what you were then told by Peace Corps, by America, that you were going to be doing. So a lot of times people come in thinking, oh, I'm going to be a math teacher, or I'm going to be an English teacher, and I'm going to build a library, right? And going in, I think the most important thing was trying to figure out my relationships and my place there. So yes, I was a math teacher assigned, but going in, they needed someone to teach, not only to like high schoolers, but they needed someone help teaching at the middle school. And so I ended up teaching a lot of science and math throughout. That was my main job. But then a lot of times you have this opportunity to create like a second project. And that second project is really open to whatever it is you and your community want to do. And there were certain ideas that I had, certain things that people might want to do, but in the end, it's all about the needs and the wants of your community. It's not about you, because maybe you want to go in, and like the last guy who happened to be in my village, he built this beautiful library. But since he left, it was closed down. Nobody wanted to take over as a librarian. There was all these books just sitting there, but that's not what the community wanted. What they wanted, and what they came to me as, because I thought I would continue that, was they wanted to renovate their science labs. And so even though we didn't have a lot of tools or resources or any of that, there was a lot of want and eagerness by the teachers themselves. They're like, hey, you're a scientist. I want to create experiments with you. And so a lot of times it was just simply cleaning up the science lab, washing out whatever equipment they did have, and writing down lesson plans and writing down different like experiments step by step. And as far as I know, I've been gone for 2 years, and a lot of those students have come to me saying, hey, I'm helping out with my past science teacher, and we're still doing the experiments that you helped us do. And it wasn't anything fancy. It wasn't anything of you needed all these chemicals to mix together, right? It was more of, let's use these graduated cylinders. We have rocks. Let's teach, the middle school kids about displacement and being able to drop a rock in a water to see, the actual measurements. That's something that just, they were able to see it instead of just seeing it on a board and trying to conceptualize it. I don't know if that makes sense at all.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that was one of my main projects, I guess you would say, besides teaching, was also, I guess, incorporating that was revamping the science labs. There was a lot of opportunities as well to hop on with other Peace Corps volunteers. I know one of the big projects that I've helped out with was there was a big bike against malaria. And so a lot of the health volunteers had created kind of like a lesson plan where we biked across the south of Sierra Leone, stopping at each of their different villages to teach the community about, just the health and safety practices of malaria. And without having joined them, I don't think it would have made as big of an impact, if that makes sense at all. So it was really cool to see like different communities and help out, not just my own village, but then across the nation as well.
I think you brought up a really, you said one of the most important things, I think, when we, or anybody from any country, goes to another country to work on a project, it's the idea that, you bring with you your own motivations and your own values, and you're walking into a situation where the motivations or the desires or the outcomes, desired outcomes of the people in the community likely will differ from yours in some capacity. I think, and I definitely, feel with you, my assignment was a teacher, and luckily I was able to be at a school where I feel like what I was capable of teaching was something that they were interested in learning. But you also do find, you go in and for example, I had they teach British English where I was, and my counterpart was like, oh, can you teach British culture and civilization? I was like, probably not, describing, if it's like 19th century British history, I did study that in college. I could probably teach that. But I was like, no, I'm an American, and kind of my job is to teach American culture and civilization. And, having conversations is not necessarily so straightforward when you're like, I want to teach this, you want to teach that. How do we negotiate this? I mean, how did you find that you had to have challenging conversations like this where you didn't necessarily know what they wanted, but you also maybe weren't so practiced in the local culture's way of talking and discussing these things?
Yeah, definitely. I think coming in, especially in terms of curriculum, they have a very strict curriculum of what they needed to learn in order to pass their examination at the end of their high school years. But what I found was because of the history of Sierra Leone, you know, a lot of these kids didn't go to school because there was a civil war. A lot of these kids were either working with their families, that there was a huge lack in foundations. And so even though a lot of them were saying, you need to teach, you know, calculus to these high school juniors, I was looking at what they were capable to do. And I was like, I don't think they are not there yet. They need to learn their foundations first. And there was a large like age gap as well. And so I know I had difficulties in the way that I was teaching, that sometimes they would observe, and they sometimes didn't like the way that I was getting kids like involved, if that makes sense, that they are very, you sit down and I lecture and you are just going to learn what I lecture. Whereas I'm, you know, personally being a hands-on learner, I know that students learn in different ways. And so they were looking at me strange when I was like, okay, I'm going to go outside, and I would get some rocks, I would throw them on the desk, and I'd, you know, try to, okay, if we're counting these, or this is divided how many ways, and trying to teach it that way. They looked at me very strange, and they're like, you need to teach this way. But in the end, I think just sitting down and being, just getting everyone together, not only just the other teachers and how in my department, but also having like the main principal involved, even though he was stepped back, he is ultimately was a headmaster. And that is who I was to respect, because he was my boss. No matter that I'm employed by Peace Corps, that doesn't matter. It does matter, but it didn't matter in the end, because I was not working with Peace Corps. I was working with my school, and I have to listen to what my headmaster is saying in order to get everybody on the same page. And I think in the end, we did come to a conclusion, okay, I will do half hands-on learning, or certain days of the weeks, you know, if I'm running around doing these things, you know, don't mind me. And in the end, we ended up creating, instead of using like rocks, we ended up creating like, you know, longer term sustainable things, like carving out little blocks and writing numbers on those, or things, that tools that they could just then use year after year, and teaching the other teachers, oh, here's my ideas, and kind of collaborating on lesson plans. That way all the grade levels were kind of all on the same page, if that makes sense. So it was still then standardized. It wasn't just me doing my own thing with my class, but I wasn't also just lecturing like they wanted. We did a half and half compromise.
Was that strange to be, I mean, was it strange for them, or was it strange for you to walk into a very formal, I imagine, you know, structured situation with like a lot of deference paid to like older, you know, maybe male people in charge, as like a young female? Because like certainly, like I walked into my high school where I taught wearing like jeans and like, you know, very casually, hi, how are you, you know, into a teacher's lounge. And I was like suddenly the equal with people who'd been teaching for like 25 years. And I had like more unfettered access to like the director. And like, I was certainly not as familiar with more rigid lines of operation and communication and approval, which I, you know, is much more kind of American. And in other cultures, a lot of times there is a much more written, you know, we have to check with every single level, and you have to get the head honchos. Did you face specific challenges with that, or people questioning you, or questioning what value you had there?
Yeah, so actually I was pretty lucky that I had 2 Peace Corps volunteers before me in my village. It had been a long time since, but it was still, some of them had worked with previous volunteers before, so that was helped lay the groundwork for me to be there. However, I was a female and the previous volunteers were male. So when I walked in, I had a bigger school, and there was about 30 male teachers, and they were dressed to the nines. And here I am, this, Peace Corps volunteers are typically seen as, oh, they're like hippies and they're dirty. That is, you cannot be that way at school. You have to be, when you're outside of school, it's one thing, but you also have to be, to get the respect, you have to be perfect. You need to be showered, cleaned, hair combed. And luckily there was one other female teacher who was young, but she was teaching at the middle school and I was at the high school. And I think the hardest part was to get them to recognize me as an equal. And they're like, oh yeah, she's a Peace Corps volunteer, but she's only here temporarily. And it's yes, but also at the same time, I have some ideas that I think would be great in the long run. And I think one, getting their respect, and also two, listening to them and what they have to say. Because then again, here I am coming in, and yes, I, grew up, both my parents were teachers, and I was coming in as a new teacher. But I would have not been in a classroom for 25 years. Ultimately, they know their students really well from elementary all the way up. They know how the culture is. They know how these kids are going to behave. They know the school system in and out. And I think at the end of the day, listening to them and listening to what they have to say and taking in, kind of like leading by example, is if they're telling me one thing and I use that and I try that out in my classroom and it works, I think they were more willing in the end to then listen to me, because they're like, okay, well, she came in and she's not telling us what to do, but she's listening to us and she's taking our ideas. So why don't we reciprocate that, and try it as well. And I think that's what worked the best, is by building relationships and, showing them respect and not being, I know everything, because you don't. You don't know anything. At the end of the day, you're still learning their culture, you're learning their language and their system. So
I think that strikes me as, so universal. My husband was also a Peace Corps volunteer, and he would probably, in another country at another time, he would probably really identify with your, having gotten an assignment and gotten to his site and then being like, actually, this is not really my assignment.
Yeah.
It's not their assignment. But even though he was in like a rural mountain town in Peru, and, after the advent of like podcasts and like terabytes storage and the ability to like have like multiple seasons of television shows, and I was in a large town of 250,000 people in Eastern Europe with VH1 and HBO and TV in English and stuff like that. I think this concept of what makes these experiences, and it sounds like yours too, so similar, so universal, is this idea that you may have this idea, or you may be an expert, but you're coming in and your job is to work with local people, and it doesn't mean you can't do anything unless you gain trust, right? And you show respect. Brendan, I'm really curious. I feel like I was going to have you introduce your projects and stuff, but now I'm wondering, just in hearing Alexa and me talk about these things, are any of these themes that we're talking about relevant in your experience to your project that you put together in North Macedonia? And, like how so? Maybe tell us a little bit about the project.
Absolutely. So the context is a little bit different. Essentially, a year after my Yes Abroad experience, I returned to Macedonia to design and implement a youth interethnic understanding conference. It was just a conference at the time, and it wasn't like, say, Peace Corps or another fellowship opportunity where I was stepping into a country, into a leadership position where I hadn't lived there before. I had the opportunity to live in Macedonia for a year as part of the Yes Abroad program, and the Yes Abroad program in Macedonia does an extraordinarily good job, as well as the Macedonian community in Skopje does a great job of really welcoming Yes Abroad participants into the country and into our host schools and our host families. So you very much feel like you're a member of the community and learn a lot about how the community functions. And so I already had a bunch of connections in the country. I knew quite a bit about the culture, but still there were challenges. And even though I wasn't placed there with an organization, I was just on a very flexible grant that I had received from a foundation in the United States. There were still a lot of matters that I need to be very flexible about. So the reason why the program's actually become reoccurring and the program was developed the way it was actually because of a giant sort of failure on the part of myself, is that we weren't able to recruit enough participants for the conference. So we had all of this money left over in being able to implement the program, and we decided that we need to expand the program to do something with the money, or else the foundation would have been angry and was like, wait, why have you only spent half of our money? So we instead of having a conference, had this fully developed youth program that had a full second phase and where participants designed and implemented projects throughout Macedonia. So still being flexible, even though it wasn't as much of being directed and being told this is what I'll be doing and what I actually did was sort of what I planned on doing, what I wrote in a grant proposal, and then how, with the context of everything that was taking place on the ground in Macedonia at that time, as well as the resources available, what was actually most feasible during implementation of the program.
Yeah, and it's super fascinating. And I remember reading about your project like after it happened, and I think we even talked about it while it was going on. But it was one of the things that was really striking is this is such a complex topic that you worked on. Maybe you can go a little bit more into the details of the project itself. But being part of a complex project in a country where and on a sensitive topic, on a country where you're not from, it can be like a big challenge, right? Like suddenly you're kind of coming in and potentially managing a situation where you don't necessarily understand all of the ground rules. Was any of this like a specific challenge in working with participants or maybe with stakeholders, like different stakeholders throughout like the Macedonian or Albanian communities?
So I don't know about you, Alexa, but I'm having a lot of trouble hearing you, Sky.
Yeah, a little bit.
You too? I have trouble hearing you guys too. I don't know what's going on. You know what? Let me find another location of my house. Take my charger with me just in case. Sorry, you guys get a tour of Casa Henry here. All right, let's try this. Can you hear me now, or is it the same?
Yep.
Yeah.
Can hear you well now.
Oh, great. So I guess what I was saying is, you were working on a project that was a little bit sensitive and complex in a country with a lot of kind of complexities. Like every country is complex, but you were coming in not as a native Macedonian and don't necessarily have all of the ground rules. What were your challenges that you needed to work through, maybe within this level of complexity or with different stakeholders from the community, your funders, everyone who's involved? Like, how did you manage kind of working through those challenges?
So the greatest challenge I would say in that context was gaining trust in the beginning. So Macedonia is very much a society built upon connections. So you can't design a flyer that's good enough to attract a bunch of participants. Like that just doesn't work. Or at one point we were putting out Facebook advertisements and thousands upon thousands, tens of thousands of people were seeing them. We weren't getting applicants that way. We were getting applicants through our peer-to-peer network within the country. And that's the same as far as like every category of sort of the implementation of the programs that I've done. So even finding contractors or getting program coordinators or finding the vendor that we're going to use for where we're going to have the events themselves, like that's all based off of personal connections. And so fortunately I had a lot of those from the YES Abroad program, but I still continuously had to develop those during my time in the country. Concerning like the sensitive aspect of it, so the programs relate directly to ethnic tensions. Though for those watching who aren't as familiar with the Balkans is like Southeastern Europe. So speaking about countries like Greece, North Macedonia, Albania, Kosovo, Bosnia, Croatia. And most people, when they hear those countries, they think about the unfortunate genocides and other acts of ethnic cleansing that took place in the 1990s. But the issue regarding ethnic tension in that region is even far deeper than what took place in the 1990s. There have unfortunately been episodes of ethnic tension throughout time. Macedonia suffered the greatest during the Holocaust and World War II, for example. It was occupied by the Ottoman Empire for over 800 years. There were wars between Macedonia and Bulgaria with high numbers of casualties on both sides of civilians in the early 1900s. And so there have been substantial issues throughout time. But most people in the Balkans, or at least in Macedonia, the way people approach the issue there is in a very progressive and positive manner, where there can be these community dialogues. on it. And so Macedonia was the only member state of Yugoslavia to break away from Yugoslavia in a peaceful manner. There were some minor episodes of violence a few years later after that in the early 2000s, but most people understand that there needs to be greater conversations between the various ethnic communities, ethnic Macedonians, ethnic Albanians, Turks, Serbs, Romani within the country. And so sort of speaking about an issue in the most honest way. In the Balkans, everything's very blunt. So being blunt about the issue that is presented, people were very receptive to that. That our program, the Bridging Backgrounds program, the first one we did with high school students, that's one of the sort of distinctive marks of the work that we were doing there, the work that I and the organizing team were doing on the ground, was that we were very open and honest about the problem of ethnic tension. And then the other distinctive element was that we worked directly with the communities as far as young people who are most affected by it and empowering them with the skills and resources necessary to solve the problem in their own towns and cities and schools. And so we provide them. Oh, I'm sorry, did you have something to say,
I was
Scott?
going to say, like, and like Alexa, did you face some like incredulity, like people being like, what are you, like an 18-year-old or 19-year-old doing here talking about this thing that you're not an expert in because you're not Macedonian and you're American? Like, did you face people being like, what's your business here? Or are you really qualified?
So I could definitely see.
Oh, sorry, for Brendan. Oh, go ahead. Brendan first and then Alexa.
So I could definitely see that if I went about implementing the programs in a different way, but truly the way that we went about it, even during the first phase of the programs had like two phases, a learning phase and an action phase. During the learning phase, how we went about learning wasn't me standing in front of a classroom lecturing people about this is what human rights are. And of course, in the United States, we have quite a different conception of human rights than Europe does. So that wasn't what I was doing. We were incorporating activities from the Council of Europe, which Macedonia has signed off onto. So we're incorporating a curriculum that they have theoretically agreed to as a nation using it in their cultural context. And then most of the activities, even during that phase, were participatory led. So it was conversations with participants, then bringing in their own lived experience, and then bringing in people who were from Macedonia and who had done work there, such as guest speakers or community action trainer facilitators, in order to have those conversations. So it wasn't sort of the ugly American stereotype of me getting in front of a classroom and saying, this is our conception of wonderful human rights. Yeah, this is our Constitution. These are our 10 amendments, or this is how it should be. That's not how I went about it. And then another issue is that there have historically, the United States, again, has been involved in many regions of the world. It's been involved in the Balkans, and some people agree with how the United States has been involved in the Balkans. Some people disagree, and that sort of division is substantially on the lines of ethnicity, because U.S. activities in the Balkans have benefited some ethnic groups and have not benefited other ethnic groups. And so that wasn't as much of an issue as I actually thought it would be. There were some comments from people who were outside of the program that this being funded, and the first program wasn't funded by the State Department, but I have also implemented programs funded by the State Department and haven't had very many issues. But just in people making comments and saying, well, you're coming in here with external funding. It's not from Macedonia. What's your motivations here? Because some people feel like they've been burned before. They've been burned by actors coming in with external resources before and sort of laying down their fists in how it should be. But once people saw sort of the way that I and the other members of the organizing team, who were all except for one other Yes Abroad student from Macedonia, implementing these programs, we were able to get a lot of community buy-in. So the community was quite.
Alexa, was being an American like a lightning rod for you as well? Like, did people come with their preconceptions about what you were doing there, or their questions about what you were doing there, and that you must have like certain political or international like thoughts about the international aspect or the relationship with Sierra Leone?
I think definitely 100%. I was there the year after Trump got elected. And so a lot of people were surprisingly had followed up on things. A lot of their information might have been skewed, but that was definitely something, especially when he came out with that whole statement about them being a shithole country. That was when I was there. And a lot of people kind of put a target on people's backs, because it's like, oh, if you're representing your country and you're representing, this is your president, why are you really here? What do you really think about us? Don't beat around the bush type thing. And that, it's not true. A lot of us, we don't necessarily represent our president, but we do represent our country in a way. And so having to, I think, focus on having those personal relationships and having, neighbors and people stand up for you there, that is where that's going to override those stereotypes. And it's like, look, just get to know me first. Not, I know I'm an American, but I also am my own person. And I'm here with Peace Corps as an organization. And we do things, this is how we do things. And I'm here to be a part of your community. I'm here to learn your language. I'm here to respect your culture. I'm not here to run the show. And I think getting that out on the table, people started to more respect that, because a lot of Americans that have come in before us, or different organizations, NGOs, no matter what the country was, they come in for a few hours. They're either at the clinic, or they come in and they fix the well and they leave. And a lot of the NGOs that they had seen have money, they're getting a foreign salary. So they have these nice houses, they have cars, they're eating good, nice food. And I think them seeing us walking around the town, taking local transportation, being like, oh, I don't have enough money to pay for fish today, and not seeing us eat what they eat and walking around and, essentially living at the level that they're living, I gained a lot more respect in that sense, that they understood us, that we're not just some, fancy Americans coming in, throwing our money around and walking all over the place. It's like, no, we truly are wanting to be a part of your community, and treating them like your own, I guess you would say.
Yeah, and I identify with that too. I think I went into Peace Corps in 2 months after the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003, and it's definitely a conversation starter when I lived there, and certainly, I think this idea that you come in with a certain level of resources, or you must, that you just must be wealthy because other Americans they've met have been wealthy, or, relatively speaking, you are wealthy, can be sometimes quite a hindrance, right, for people necessarily trusting you, or for them thinking that you are there for the reasons that you say you are. And I think no matter what you do, no matter how much you research a country before going into it, either for doing a project or for doing something like Peace Corps, which is obviously much longer, there are these cultural norms or ideas or misconceptions that are held that you never kind of get until you slowly start trying to do your work, your project, and maybe they start kind of coming out in unexpected ways. So I want to be conscientious of time. We probably have about another 10 minutes or so, maybe 15. And I'm curious, I want to tie this back to your Yes Abroad experiences and how you guys felt you were prepared, or maybe less prepared, or what kind of, qualities or skills you feel like you'd gotten from your experiences on Yes Abroad that you felt like, because if I told, you guys are both young. You're older than some of our alumni, and, but you're still in your mid-20s, right? Early mid-20s. And, I think that's if you tell somebody who's maybe 20, 22 now, hey, in like 2 years, you're going to go in and you're going to teach a curriculum in a foreign country, or you're going to put together a multi-pronged, workshop involving curricula from various sources and guest speakers and facilitating, cooperation or, a type of project or grant development within a country, talking about ethnic tensions, that seems very overwhelming. And I guess I'm curious if you guys felt overwhelmed. And so I guess it's a multi-part question. Did you feel overwhelmed? But also, what skills do you feel like you had from your exchange experience that helped you manage these kind of overwhelming feelings, or made you think that it's not overwhelming, I got this? Like, what kinds of experiences do you feel like you had that helped you with that?
Yeah, so there were many points that I felt overwhelmed. So when I was writing the grant originally, so like when you're writing a grant, you know, you're talking about all of these lofty ideas, and I was talking about all these things I would do that I had no idea how to do at the time. And then I remember when I found out like I had received this grant, I was like, oh my, now I need to actually figure out how I'm going to implement this program. Like what did I step into here? And over the course of the project, there were a variety of challenges presented to myself, other team members, and participants. I was like, this is the end. This is going to be the end of Brendan Schultz in Macedonia. Like I'm going to be deported from the country, and they're never going to allow me to come back in, and I'm not going to want to come back in because I'll hold my head in shame. But what sort of my YES experience taught me, sort of on a personal level, since with the YES program, you're not organizing stuff as much. It's much more about personal development. You're building this relationship with a community outside of the United States. Was that every problem has a solution, and oftentimes when you're in the thick of a problem in a foreign environment, the problem seems much larger than it actually is, because things don't function the same way in the United States. So the process you're expecting to happen naturally isn't going to be the case abroad. But there's other like safety nets, so to speak, that will catch you. So in Macedonia, like if you have an issue, say the government say if you need to call the police, like it's probably not going to be as much of an effective over the long term unless like an immediate safety type thing. But you have your host family to depend on, and they'll help you in that particular circumstance. Like there was an issue when I was in Macedonia which related to that, and so there's other forms of safety nets, and like there's a solution to every problem. It's just different outside of the United States, and you need to trust that the host community is going to have some sort of path to figure things out.
Not better, not worse, just different. Am I gonna be the first one to say that? Okay, Alexa, from your experience, like what did it feel overwhelming at times? If so, like did your exchange experience like help you through it?
Yeah, I want to say 100%, just picking back off of what Brendan was saying, is that every problem does have a solution. And one of the main things that I learned from Yes Abroad was the power of community. And here in the US, we're a very individualistic society, and you're not necessarily going to rely on all your coworkers or all friends or people, somebody down the street. But there was a saying there for us: if you ever in trouble or anything, need help, just run down the street and find a mommy, find a woman. And that's more of like a personal safety thing, but also in the end you can almost talk to anybody about anything in that community. And a lot of people just sitting down, just the power of just being able to sit down with people that you've formed relationships with and just talk it through, they will 100% put in their 2 cents. And that also they're very forgiving, that a lot of people, they know you're going to make mistakes. They're going to, in my particular community, they are very blunt. They'll tell it to your face. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. When the sun goes down, it's done. It's over. They don't hold grudges. And I think learning that and not dwelling on the mistakes you've made and just moving on and going forward is probably the best thing that you can do. It's the same thing as when I was in Malaysia. There were different things that, they're not going to tell you exactly how the culture is. Don't do this, don't do that. They're not going to tell you every little thing. You have to be observant. But if you make a mistake, like he was saying, your host family is going to tell you something, or they might not, depending on the culture. But definitely the power of the community and relying on the relationships that you formed and just being who you are. You're not an amazing, indestructible person. You're gonna make mistakes. You're not the same. For us, like even if a different volunteer came into my community, they will not have the same relationships that I have. They're not going to do the same projects that I have. And just staying true to who you are and bringing in your passion and your strengths and tying that with your community relationships, and that's what's going to take you really far in the end.
That's great. Yeah, I relate to that too. I think, and honestly, I think this is a common theme with our last Instagram Live conversation about just the idea of starting small. That I think a lot of times when you're on your own as an alum, maybe you're not in a huge group of people, we might feel, especially in Yes Abroad and as Americans, but maybe other exchange alumni as well, that we have this pressure that we put on us, that we feel society puts on us, that this is a YES program, alumni program, like this pressure comes on us. And if we try it and it doesn't work, it will be a waste. It'll be a failure. It'll be embarrassing. And, there, as we talked about in the other, as Yvonne and Margaret and Mia talked about in the other thing, like, it's not just about the product or the outcome when you're doing projects like this. It's also about the learning experience. So of course you're going to make mistakes. And this is what we tell you guys on Yes Abroad as well, and orientations. Like, yeah, you're going to make mistakes. But like, so let's just get that out of the way. The most important thing is, like, you keep kind of working towards your goal, but also you learn in the meantime. And there's value in that. And we want to continue encouraging people to grow and learn. And I think this is just kind of like the next level of that. You guys both were like, oh my gosh, what did I, get myself into? Or, I'm never going to be successful. And I think especially for Peace Corps, or maybe for Fulbright, where you're given like this job, like you are now a teacher. You have this like inherent sense of like, I have to do this. And you get there and the hills you have to climb are much more treacherous, because there are these, like with you and Brendan, there are these kind of intercultural communication challenges, or there's different stakeholders, or maybe you're not as taken as seriously, and you have to you feel like you still have to achieve this level of this end goal to be seen as doing your job. And in reality, people make mistakes. Things don't always happen the way that you think they're going to happen. But I think this idea of community that you both incorporated, it's really heartening. And ultimately it's why, you guys did these programs to begin with, and why you were successful, and why you kind of keep coming back, and why you're both engaged in continuing to help your community. I was going to get to Brendan's other projects in the US, but I feel like we're kind of maybe out of time. I want to provide an opportunity for you guys to add anything else that you want to add about that maybe we didn't cover in talking about international projects, or complex projects, or projects with multiple stakeholders or diverse kind of groups of people involved. And, if anybody who's been waiting in the chat to like ask a question, now definitely is your time. But I guess I'll just turn the floor back over to you guys one more time. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah, certainly. So if for those of you who are watching who are alumni of the Yes Abroad program, or a Yes Inbound program, or any other State Department outbound or inbound program, there's plenty of funding opportunities to do stuff like this. And so you might be saying to yourself, like, oh, well, I have this idea, but where will I ever get money? So if you're a State Department alumnus of a State Department program, there's plenty of opportunities for funding. So for U.S. alumni, each year in the fall, typically, there's a proposal release called the Citizens Diplomacy Action Fund, which is up for $10,000. That can be used for a project anywhere in the world. It can be in the U.S. or abroad. And then for alumni who are not U.S. citizens who came into the United States, there's also a bunch of other funding opportunities that are typically posted online. The most infamous of them is the Alumni Innovation Award that goes out each year. So there's plenty of opportunities for funding. The State Department's recognized that the people who participate in exchange programs have a unique perspective to improve the lives of people in their communities, and provide the resources for us to do so.
That's great. Thank you for bringing that up. I can't believe we didn't even talk about funding. But yes, and Flex alumni, Yes Inbound alumni, Yes Abroad alumni can also apply for annual alumni grants through the Flex and Yes programs as well. Those are advertised on social media, but also through implementing organizations in your countries. Alexa, anything else to add?
Not too much. I just say, just don't be afraid. Just start somewhere. And even at the end of the day, if you feel like you failed and you didn't do anything, you actually did. And even if you just made one friend while you're abroad, you've greatly impacted their lives just as much as you, just through that personal relationship. So little successes do add up. It's not about the big success, I reached my goal in the end, So that's it.
That's great. I love it. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks everyone for watching, and definitely reach out, just DM us if you have any questions about anything. If you want to be put in touch with Alexa to talk about Peace Corps, if any Yes Abroad alumni ever want to talk about that, you can reach out to her. You can reach out to me. There's a few other RPCVs in the alumni community. And if you want to talk to Brendan about his projects, definitely, Brendan, they can reach out to us and we can put them in touch with you. Is that okay?
Absolutely, yeah. Happy
All
to
right,
talk.
guys. Thank you so much. Have a great week.
Yep. Thanks for having
You
me.
as well.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.